The Galactic Council chamber echoed with the smug laughter of alien warlords. Seated in a semicircle of levitating thrones, the high-ranking officers of the Zelkar Dominion watched the holographic projection of human weaponry with barely concealed amusement. A plasma-clad warrior leaned forward, mandibles clicking in derision. These ballistic weapons, he sneered, gesturing toward the outdated rifle displayed in the hologram. What is this, a relic from a forgotten war? A metal tube that spits lead? The chamber erupted in laughter. Another alien, a towering brute with thick, armor-plated skin, crossed his massive arms. Primitive, unworthy of the battlefield. His voice was deep, rumbling like shifting tectonic plates. We have surpassed such things. Plasma, antimatter, neutron disintegrators, this is real power. Seated across from them, Admiral Vasquez of Earth sat in silence, his expression unreadable. He let them talk, let them scoff, let them belittle human ingenuity. When the laughter finally died down, he leaned forward slightly, tapping his fingers against the polished table. Are you finished? The alien general grunted. Finished? We have barely begun. But do tell, Admiral, what grand secret do you humans believe will close this gap? What miracle technology do you hide? Vasquez exhaled through his nose. No miracle. No secret. Just physics. The response drew more chuckles. Physics? Vasquez shrugged. Your energy weapons are impressive, no doubt. Elegant in theory. But energy dissipates. Shields can redirect plasma, absorb directed beams. But do you know what doesn't dissipate? He leaned forward, voice cold. Mass in motion. Kinetic force. 100% energy transfer upon impact. Silence. The aliens exchanged glances, their amusement faltering. The brute scoffed. You expect us to fear faster pebbles? Vasquez smiled thinly. Then prove it. Face us in a controlled combat scenario. No politics, no excuses. Bring your finest soldiers. We bring ours. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Then the Zelkar commander bared his serrated fangs in a predatory grin. Very well, human. We accept. The barren world of Drakkar 7 was a wasteland of ash and broken mountains. A long-dead battlefield where no civilization had stood for centuries. It was the perfect proving ground. The alien spectators filled the observation deck of the Zelkar warship, watching with confident anticipation. The betting pools were already forming. How long would the humans last? 5 minutes? 10? Their warriors, the Dominion's finest, stood in gleaming nanite armor, plasma rifles humming in their hands. Shields active, confidence absolute. Their victories spanned 1,000 worlds. Their technology unrivaled. And then he arrived. The human combatant walked alone onto the field. No advanced exosuit, no energy shielding, no sleek plasma rifle. Just muscle, scars, and a monstrous machine gun strapped across his chest like an executioner's blade. The Gatling-style heavy machine gun glinted under the dim light of the alien sun. The ammo belt hung from it like the fangs of some ancient beast, each round the size of a plasma grenade. The laughter from the alien audience was immediate and deafening. This is their champion? Where is his armor? What fool carries a projectile weapon in this age? Even the Dominion warriors chuckled. One, a towering reptilian with blue-tinted scales, stepped forward, his shield flaring to life in a crackling arc of energy. He raised his plasma rifle, tapping a claw against the side. You will not even dent my defenses, human. Make your peace. The man, Baba Yaga, as the humans called him, rolled his neck, adjusting his grip on the massive weapon. Yeah, he muttered, pulling the bolt back. We'll see. A silence settled over the battlefield. The air, thick with tension, seemed to still as Baba Yaga planted his feet, squared his shoulders, and unleashed hell. The roar of the machine gun shattered the sky. A wall of lead and fire erupted from the barrel, spitting out bullets the size of a Zelkar's fist at 4,000 rounds per minute. The muzzle flash lit the battlefield like a dying star, and the sheer thunder of gunfire drowned out all other sound. The first 100 rounds hit the alien warrior in under a second. His shield flared, strained, then collapsed outright. The next 50 rounds tore through his armor as if it were paper. The last 20 rounds removed what was left of him from existence. The watching aliens froze, their amusement ripped from them like air from a breached hull. One of the Dominion officers leaned forward, his mandibles trembling. What? The machine gun's relentless roar did not stop. Baba Yaga swept the battlefield with calculated efficiency, walking forward like a god of war. Each squeeze of the trigger sent a storm of kinetic death ripping through their ranks. Plasma bolts whined uselessly past him. Their wielders panicked, unfocused aim betraying their fear. The soldiers tried to activate their shields, but it didn't matter. Ballistics didn't care about energy barriers. Ballistics didn't care about arrogance. Ballistics only cared about one thing: killing. The second alien dropped, his body riddled with smoking holes. A third soldier, desperate, lunged for cover, too late. The rounds chewed through rock, flesh, and bone alike, leaving nothing but ruin. In under 15 seconds, the battlefield was unrecognizable. The unstoppable, invincible warriors of the Dominion lay scattered in the dirt, their plasma weapons cooling in lifeless hands. Baba Yaga stopped firing, letting the barrel of his machine gun smoke in the cold air. He exhaled, rolling his shoulders as he reloaded with practiced ease. Above, in the observation deck, no one spoke. The aliens stared in mute horror, their previous laughter now a phantom of the past. Someone whispered, This isn't possible." A Zelkar warlord gripped his throne's armrest, claws digging into the metal. That was only one human. Vasquez, still seated, folded his arms, his face unreadable. "Now," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "shall we continue?" The silence from the observation deck stretched on, a suffocating weight pressing down on the gathered alien warlords. No one had expected this. No one had even considered this. The invincible warriors of the Dominion, trained in the most advanced combat techniques, armed with plasma weapons capable of vaporizing armored vehicles, lay dead, cut down in seconds by nothing more than raw kinetic devastation. The implications sank in like a slow-moving plague. Vasquez let them stew in it. He didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He simply waited. The humans had learned patience a long time ago. They had learned that underestimation was a blade that cut deepest when wielded by the enemy. Finally, one of the warlords, his voice stripped of its former arrogance, broke the silence. Was this some trick? No one answered. Another warlord, one with gleaming, bioluminescent eyes, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Perhaps their warrior was an anomaly, a genetic outlier. There is no way an entire species relies on such crude, primitive tactics. Vasquez exhaled, slow and measured. Primitive. He gestured to the battlefield, where the last wisps of smoke curled from the barrel of the machine gun. What you call primitive, we call effective. The bioluminescent warlord clenched his jaw, frustration flashing across his features. And what of our plasma? What of our energy weapons? They have burned cities to dust across 100 worlds. You humans cannot stand against that. Vasquez tilted his head slightly. You ever heard of the Battle of Artemis Prime? No response. He leaned forward. Let me tell you a story. Artemis Prime was supposed to be a slaughter. The Dominion's fleet, fresh from their conquest of the Vortac Expanse, had arrived over the human colony world, expecting nothing but a quick orbital bombardment followed by planetary subjugation. The standard playbook. It had worked 1,000 times before. Only this time it didn't. The Dominion's ships fired their plasma lances, expecting human defenses to crumple instantly. They didn't. Instead, the humans had built underground railgun batteries that fired slugs at near-relativistic speeds, gutting capital ships in a single shot. Plasma spread and dispersed upon impact with the colony's reinforced defenses, but kinetic rounds tore straight through energy shields, armor, and bulkheads like they weren't even there. Within the first 6 minutes, the Dominion lost a third of their fleet. By the 10th minute, they had lost orbital control altogether. By the 20th, they were retreating in disarray, hounded by human strike craft using old-fashioned missiles and autocannons. Vasquez let the weight of his words settle over the room before delivering the final blow. "That was 20 years ago," he said, voice cold. "And we've only gotten better since." The warlords shifted uncomfortably, their former bravado now a distant memory. One of them, a creature with obsidian-black armor plating and slitted pupils, finally found his voice. "So what is it, then? What is the secret? Your weapons are outdated. Your tactics should be irrelevant. Yet you stand here having bested us." Vasquez didn't hesitate. "The secret? We never stopped fighting." He gestured to Baba Yaga, who was now methodically checking his weapon, his expression unreadable. "While you perfected elegance, we perfected efficiency. While you sought clean, bloodless kills, we built weapons that turned battlefields into hellscapes. You sought dominance, we sought survival." He let his gaze sweep across the assembled warlords. "And in the end, survival wins. Every damn time." A murmur spread through the chamber. Some of the aliens were beginning to understand. Others were still clinging to their delusions. One of the more defiant warlords, his crest flaring in agitation, slammed a fist against the table. "No, this changes nothing." His voice carried a desperate edge, as if he were trying to convince himself more than anyone else. "A single battle proves nothing. We have entire fleets, legions of soldiers. You may win a skirmish, but you cannot win a war." Vasquez smiled. Not a smirk, not an arrogant grin, a knowing smile. "You still don't get it." He leaned forward, his next words slow and deliberate. "We're already at war, and you've already lost." The warlord's crest flattened. "Impossible." Vasquez didn't blink. "Every world you think you hold? You don't. Every colony you've conquered? There are human insurgents there right now, bleeding your forces dry. Every trade route you control? We're hitting your supply lines, starving your war machine. Every advantage you think you have." He shook his head. "It's gone." More murmurs. Some of the warlords began exchanging worried glances. One of them, quieter than the rest, finally spoke. "Why? Why fight like this? Why not surrender? Accept Dominion rule?" Vasquez's expression hardened. "Because we know what happens to the conquered." He let that hang in the air, his tone deadly serious. "We've seen what you do to the species under your control. We've seen the purges, the forced labor, the genetic experiments." His voice was now a blade pressed against their throats. "You don't leave survivors. You leave subjects." The chamber fell into absolute silence. Then, finally, the realization hit. The warlords had assumed the humans were simply another species to be assimilated. That their resistance was temporary. That they would eventually bow. But that wasn't what was happening. The humans weren't resisting. They were retaliating. And they weren't going to stop. The weight of the realization settled over the warlords like a suffocating fog. Some still refused to accept it, clinging to the belief that their fleets, their numbers, their technology would eventually tip the scales. But others saw it for what it was. A slow, creeping certainty that they had underestimated humanity in ways they couldn't afford. One of the more seasoned warlords, his skin marked with scars from 100 campaigns, finally exhaled. "If this is true, if your kind fights this way, then you must have lost just as much as you've taken." Vasquez's gaze didn't waver. "We have." The warlord studied him. "Then why keep going?" Vasquez leaned back slightly. "Because stopping isn't an option." The warlord frowned. "Every war has a price. And every soldier has a breaking point." Vasquez nodded. "That's true. But here's what you don't understand." He gestured toward Baba Yaga, who remained silent, his presence alone radiating a quiet, lethal certainty. "You think breaking points stop us. But for humans, that's just the beginning." The warlord's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" Vasquez's voice was quiet, steady, unshakable. "Pain doesn't stop us. Loss doesn't stop us. It hardens us." He let that settle before continuing. "You think we fight because we love war? Because we enjoy the struggle? No. We fight because we know what happens if we don't. We've seen extinction before. We've seen what happens when a species isn't willing to do what's necessary. We won't make that mistake. The room was deathly silent now. One of the younger warlords, less sure of himself than the others, shifted uncomfortably. Then what do you want? Vasquez exhaled, eyes cold. We want you to leave us alone. The words were simple, direct, and yet the weight behind them was unmistakable. The younger warlord scoffed, trying to recover some semblance of confidence. You expect the Dominion to simply walk away? Vasquez's expression didn't change. No, I expect you to try and fight, and I expect you to lose. A few warlords bristled at that, but none of them spoke, because the evidence was right in front of them. Their most advanced warriors had been annihilated in seconds. Their fleets had been bested by weapons they considered obsolete. Their war machine was being bled dry from the shadows. Another warlord, one of the more pragmatic ones, finally broke the silence. Let's say we do leave. What stops humanity from coming for us next? Vasquez's eyes darkened. We don't conquer. We don't enslave. We don't need an empire. His voice was sharp now. But if you come for us again, if you push us into a corner. He leaned forward, his next words slow and deliberate. Then we'll show you what real war looks like. The silence was suffocating. The warlords understood then. This wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't diplomacy. It was a warning. A final chance to walk away before it was too late. For a long moment no one moved. Then the oldest warlord, the one with the scars and experience, nodded slowly. He had lived long enough to recognize when a war was unwinnable. We will discuss this among our ranks, he said carefully. But understand this, if the Dominion chooses to fight, it will be total. Vasquez didn't blink. Then so will our response. The warlords stood, tension thick in the air. No more words were exchanged. They had heard everything they needed to hear. And as they departed, one thing became clear. For the first time in history, the Dominion feared humanity. The warlords left the chamber in silence, their confidence shattered, their arrogance replaced with unease. None of them spoke, but the tension between them was undeniable. Some still clung to the belief that the Dominion's might would prevail, that humanity's defiance was nothing more than a temporary nuisance. Others, the wiser ones, knew better. The Dominion had never faced an enemy like this before. They had conquered species that begged for mercy, civilizations that surrendered the moment their fleets darkened the sky. But humanity was different. Humanity refused. Humanity endured. And worst of all, humanity learned. Vasquez watched them go, his expression unreadable. He had seen this before. The moment when an empire realized it was no longer untouchable. Some of these warlords would push for war, desperate to reclaim their dominance. Others would argue for retreat, knowing that a prolonged conflict with humanity would end in disaster. It didn't matter. Humanity was ready. Baba Yaga remained by his side, silent as ever, his weapons still within reach. He had no interest in politics, in negotiations, in the weight of galactic diplomacy. His purpose was simpler. He existed to end fights before they started. And if the Dominion made the wrong choice, he would be there when the first shots were fired. Vasquez finally turned, walking away without another word. There was nothing left to say. The message had been delivered. The warning had been given. The Dominion thought they were invincible. They thought humanity was weak. But now they knew the truth. Humanity wasn't prey. Humanity wasn't an empire waiting to be conquered. Humanity was a force that would not break. And if war came, the Dominion would learn one final, terrible lesson. There were no survivors in a war of extinction.